podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello, I'm your host, Les Bubka. Welcome to Anxious Black Belt, a podcast that focuses on karate, mental health, and everything in between. If you enjoy our content and would like to support us, best way to do that is to listen to another episode, share with your friends, and leave us a review. All this stuff helps the mysterious algorithm to introduce our podcast to new audience. Thank you for joining me, and let's listen to the episode. Thank you, Dave, for joining me today. I know it's gonna be a difficult. Some people might get upset, but I am so grateful for you to allowing me to talk to you about your experiences in that difficult time. And I think those conversations are needed so people can learn from it and be as brave as you are.
Well, I don't know about brave, Les. Sometimes we have to deal with things because that's the choice we're being given. But yeah, thank you for saying that anyway.
Can you take us through your first start with the martial arts, like everybody? Why karate, and how did you end up in karate?
Well, like a lot of people, it was basically the nearest club, martial arts club, when I was growing up. I was a sickly little child, very, very small for my age, skinny little thing. And basically, I needed to toughen up a little bit. And there was a karate club just down the road in an area called Wyburn. It's a bit of a notorious estate in Sheffield. And it was a club up on the roof, believe it or not, of a local pub called Windsor Pub. That's how I basically got into it.
That's a perfect location for a start. Did you already went to the testing your martial arts skills on the first day in a pub downstairs?
I was a little bit young. I started back in, I think it was around 1985. So I would have been around about 9 years old. It was a bit of an unusual place, to be honest, because I used to be able to walk down the road all suited and booted. It was literally 2 minutes, and you used to go around the back of the pub, and on the outside of the pub there was a spiral metal staircase, like basically walk of death. And you used to climb up this spiral vertical staircase, climb up onto the roof, and there was like an outside area, which, believe it or not, we used to train on there as well. And the ledge was only about that high. If you fell off that, you were in serious trouble. But then you used to walk in from the rooftop and go into some glass doors, and it was like I suppose it's like the loft in a house. We used to sort of train up there.
Cool, nice location then.
Not in the actual pub.
Nah, shame.
Oh, it was.
So you transitioned, you started in Wadoryu, right? If I remember properly, and then kind of slowly progressed, and now you are doing the practical side of things with the BCA. Are you in BCA or?
Oh, cutting up a little bit there, but I can kind of guess what you're saying. Yeah, I started. It was Wadru was my original style, and I still use the principles within that to feed into everything else that I do. I started with a guy called Kevin Broughton down at the Windsor pub. He was a third dan under Sensei or Phil Milner, Hanshi actually. Yeah, Hanshi Phil Milner. I think he was 10th dan, and he's quite a colourful character. If you stick his name Phil Milner into Google, you'll see some interesting videos on there. He was very, very, very well known, and sort of taught in a sort of military way. Sort of that's how it was sort of done back then. So my instructor was third dan under him, and that's basically how I started in Waterloo. I did that for about 9 years, and then I kind of drifted off into doing boxing, Thai boxing. I've trained with some really good people. I've been very, very lucky. Some British champions, European champions. Not that I put myself in their category, but I've been very good company, and I've had the pleasure of sort of learning from some very good people. Along the way, I kind of drifted away from doing all of that for a while, and then finally got back into it quite some years ago now, under a guy called Paul Treweek. And he was Wadaroo background, but he did lots of things with sort of knife defenses, back defenses. He did lots of locks and restraining holds and things like that. Just checking, can you hear me all right there, Les?
Yeah, I can hear you. I was just adjusting my blind because I'm glowing like a bulb.
All right, just checking because it's kind of flickering a little bit, but it's not bad.
Mm.
So yeah, I sort of got back into it under Paul Treweek. My original training was very much sort of, as I said, military base, fed down from Phil Milner. So it was all about fighting, sparring, tournaments, fighting. But when I got under Paul Treweek, he sort of introduced other things, a lot of bits of Aikido, the small circle Aikido, bits of Jiu-Jitsu, and that kind of started opening my mind in that direction. Unfortunately, he decided to pack in, and so I drifted off into practical world, which I was already into anyway, and Paul allowed me to sort of go down that route, even under his tutelage. And I was starting to feed some of the practical stuff back into him as well. So he was quite open-minded in that respect. And then I went looking for something that fitted my bill, so to speak, and the British Combat Association looked like a very good fit for my mindset and the practical side of things. And so I ended up moving in that direction, meeting people like Peter Considine and John Johnson.
Yeah, those who don't know how hard Peter punches, they need to go on one of his courses because you think like, yeah, okay, it might be hard, but when you receive it, and it's like, holy shit, that's a different level of hard.
Yeah, it's a different way of delivering, and when you come from a boxing background or you come from a traditional karate, I hate it when people do that, but a traditional karate background, the way that those guys punch, it's very different, and it takes some getting your head around. Yeah, so I think some people, they find it very, very difficult, and they'll give it a go and they'll just kind of like disregard it because it's not an easy thing to pick up. But if you can pick up some of the principles from it, you don't have to do it exactly how he does, but pick up some of the principles from it, add it into your own delivery system, and it does make a big difference.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. The punching is personally, it's not for me. Maybe because I'm so used to it to punching, and like you said, when you train for a long, long time, it's very difficult to change things, and you would have to go back and start changing stuff more and more. And I'm kind of settled in my ways, happy with my ways. But I always go to those seminars like I've been on yours teaching, and I enjoy trying new things and seeing how that fits with my body.
Oh, you cut up a little bit there, Les, but yeah, I kind of get what you're saying. As I say, it's not for everybody, and I don't do it. I'm not able to do it exactly how they do, but I kind of do it in the way that I pick up the principles from it, and I can deliver it in a way that suits me. And I don't use that sort of impact all the time. It depends on what I'm trying to achieve. However, the body mechanics that he uses, I find very interesting, and I have been very, very knowledgeable as well. Peter, I would definitely recommend giving him a blast because he's very knowledgeable.
Yeah, and he's a
I
very,
try
very
to
nice.
get there once a month.
Yeah, and he's very nice guy as well. He's very
Yeah,
approachable.
yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah. He'll be happy to talk to anybody.
how did you come about towards your ill health? Because you've been saying that when we talked privately, you said that you've been going to doctors forth and back, and they've been keep saying that, don't worry about it. It's just the infection and stuff like that. Could you take us through that if that's not too stressful for you?
No, it's fine. Oh, back in early 2021, I think it was. I was just in the bathroom, and all of a sudden, if you can imagine like a tire blowing on a car, it just goes sort of thing. That kind of happened in my neck. It was just on the left side of my neck. It just sort of exploded and went really quite big. So I rang up the 111 or whatever it is for the non-emergency, and based on the questions that they started asking me, they then shipped me off in an ambulance to the hospital. Some tests later, they decided that it was a viral or a bacterial infection, should I say.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave me some antibiotics and sent me on my way. And that was that. Over the next few weeks, it kind of started going down a little bit, but it never fully disappeared. I always describe it as like there was a sort of slug shape in my neck.
Mm-hmm.
It never fully disappeared. And then it flared up again, maybe, I don't know, several months later, it did it again. And so I went back to the hospital again, and same things, antibiotics, sent me back on my way. And then it happened for a third time. So over the space of a year, it happened for the third time. Just excuse me a second, Les. I have to keep having a cup of water when I'm talking. It happened for a third time. So this time I rang the doctors, and the doctors basically refused to refer me back to the hospital because the hospital had written to the doctors to say that it's nothing serious. And so basically the doctor said, we're not going to send you back because if we send you, you'll be taking the place of somebody that may really need it. I had a funny feeling something was not right. So I kind of managed to get into the hospital through the back doors. The way that I did that is I've got a T-tube in my ear. I've always had dodgy ears, and I've got a T-tube in my ear. It's like a big giant grommet that children have in their ears. And so I was already under the hospital ENT department anyway. So I rang them up and I just said, can I come for an appointment to have my ears checked? And when I was there, I said to the main guy, he's the main guy in Sheffield, I said, could you please just have a feel of this? Something's not right. As soon as he felt it, he referred me off for some scans, some biopsies and things like that. And that's how it kind of got diagnosed.
So what type of cancer did you have? Has? I don't know if that goes away or stays.
So, oh no, it certainly doesn't go away. It was a tumor at the base of my tongue, but the thing is, it had spread. So the original tumor was back there, but it spread into the lymph nodes, so into the system, which then basically feeds it all around your body. I'm quite lucky because the amount of time it took them between original checks to being diagnosed was quite significant. Any longer, I think, it would have been a different story. But the glands in my neck had managed to capture it and keep it there. But that's why they kept flaring up. So my body really did a fantastic job of not letting it go any further than it did. And so the treatment that I ended up having to have was something called chemoradiotherapy, which is basically it's both chemotherapy and radiotherapy.
So if they would check you on the first time, you probably had a better chance of fighting it much earlier if they done the proper checks and spotted that the growth on the tongue and remove it, right?
Yeah, that's right. However, doctors, anybody in life, nobody's perfect. And so they kind of looked at my age, they looked at my health, and they made a decision based on sort of balance of probabilities, I would imagine. And so I don't hold any ill will, any grudges, anything like that, because at the end of the day, I'm sat talking to you now.
Exactly.
And that probably wouldn't have happened had I not had the treatment that I decided to have. And it is a choice because the treatment's it's very, very aggressive. It's a 7-week intensive and it is aggressive. And they make no qualms in telling you how aggressive the treatment is. And so before I had it, I had to have sort of like some psychological evaluations, health checks and things like that. So it is quite aggressive. However, back to your point, yes, if they'd caught it earlier, the side effects that I've now been left with would have been lesser because the intensity and sort of level of treatment would have been less. But these things happen in life, and that's it. That's it. So it is what it is, and I was very, very, very well looked after when it was eventually diagnosed.
Yeah, I think they done whatever they could, and they fought on the spot. It's like you said, nobody's perfect, and we're all making judgments all the time based on information we have.
No,
And
everybody makes mistakes.
yeah, my intention wasn't to have a dig at the doctors. It's just to clarify
No.
that if it would be earlier, you would have a less aggressive treatment. But I remember we've been talking
That's
that.
right. Yeah, that's true, Les. Yeah, I didn't think you meant that for 1 minute. I was just sort of clarifying from my end because yes, there was a big gap. Yes, it could have been picked up earlier. However, everybody makes mistakes, and it's how you deal with those mistakes that really matter. That's what's important. And I was looked after very well.
But you said that aggressive treatment was sometimes worse than the illness itself. And I hear that from many people that when they're going through the cancer treatment, unfortunately, I know few, fortunately, unfortunately, I know a few people who went through different treatments for cancer, and they all have one thing in common. They said it's worse than a cancer. So the treatment is much more difficult than the cancer itself?
So, not to scare anybody out there that may be listening to this and potentially is in a situation that I was in earlier. I don't want to scare anybody away from having treatment if they're in that unfortunate situation where they've got to make that decision. But yeah, I can't lie about it. It's not easy. It's very, 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 very difficult. But you've got a choice, and the choice is you have the treatment, you take your chances, and you be positive about that, and you blast through, and you're determined to make it work. Or you don't have the treatment, and again, you check your chances and see what happens. Yeah, I don't want to scaremonger. I'm conscious that people may be in a situation, but my particular treatment, and probably that of many, is quite brutal. There was a point where I actually had to tell the doctors to stop saying it, to stop telling me sort of how aggressive it's going to be, how brutal the treatment is, what's likely to happen, this, that, and other. I ended up saying to them, look, can you please stop? I'm in a mindset, I'm going to blast through it, and that's that. Can you please just stop telling me? After the treatment finished and further down the line, I understand why they were doing that. They were trying to prepare me mentally, but I had ways of dealing with it myself, and I didn't want to keep listening to that. So that was how I felt about it. I just wanted to say a big thank you to family and friends. I actually went off to Manchester and had my treatment over there. And I wasn't staying in a hospital, I was staying in a hotel, and I was having to make a 30-minute transfer to the hospital and back each way, 5 days a week. And that was a bit rough at times. So there was a group of about 8 family and friends that came over and helped over the space of 6 out of the 7 weeks. It was a massive help. Without that, it would have been very, very, very difficult. And in particular, thanks to my wife for arranging all those logistics.
You said in our conversation on a Karate for Mental Health seminar that the karate mindset helped you immensely to deal with it, right? Could you take us through that?
Well, it's a case of so when you're learning karate, you're finding things difficult, you're struggling to do your techniques, you're getting beat by better opponents and everything else, the overcoming the worry and anxiety of turning up to a class and things like that. So over the stages of learning karate, you have little battles that you have to overcome. And if you're able to stick with that and you're progressing, then you get new battles. And it's a constant learning process, and it's a constant, you're having to use your mindset to continue on that journey. And I do feel that that process in itself definitely helps with overcoming adversity in your everyday life. How can it not, really?
Mm. Yeah, I think karate is really good at it, and especially with the belt system and stuff, you can actually assess it. So you're going in and looking back, oh, look how much I achieved. I'm a green belt now, and so on. So, kind of that built-in failure and overcoming system, it kind of spills out to the life, right?
Yeah, it does. It's definitely a big help. And for myself, as I say, going back in time, when I was this little sickly child, I spent more time off school than I actually spent in school. And so learning karate for me was a way to get fitter, to get stronger, mentally stronger as well as physically stronger. And I just became obsessed with it. I absolutely loved it. And that full process then that takes you into tournaments, takes you into the belt system, and particularly learning in my early days, learning under Kevin Broughton, as I said, he was under Phil Milner, and anybody that knows or has ever heard of Phil Milner will understand what that means. It was very, very, very tough training, and training that would probably be illegal these days. But the process that I went through certainly helped me in my early days, and then the continued process, yeah, it's a big help for anything in life, definitely.
So how did your training change now after going through surviving cancer? Because you're cancer free now, right? Or at least managing it.
So I've been you're classed as being in recovery for 5 years,
Hmm.
and believe it or not, the first 2 weeks after you finish your treatment are by far, in the treatment that I had, by far the worst. Even having the treatment itself, the 2 weeks after, by far the worst. But then things sort of gradually start easing up a little bit, and I've been left with quite a few long-term side effects, which I don't go into. Anybody that I train with knows that I always have to have some water by my side because the treatment has damaged my saliva glands. And I just take things just a little bit steadier now. But I'm training as I did before. I just listen to my body a little bit more. Yeah, I don't kind of like go on every seminar. I don't go full out every class anymore. I take it easy because some days I don't use good days and bad days. I use good days and slightly not so good. So on those slightly not so good days, I just take it a little bit easier. But I'm still doing what I did before.
When I met you, you've been just starting to go into a teaching people with disabilities and mental health problems and so on. Then your illness happened, if I recall properly, and then you come back now. You're doing 5 days a week teaching people with disabilities. Did your illness help you kind of being more empathetic towards the people who going through different illnesses and have a different disabilities and so on? How did that impacted your teaching style?
um, Honest answer, it hasn't impacted me in that respect at all. I was always, I kind of find it easy for me to relate to people anyway, as
Mhm.
don't to sound boastful in any way, shape, or form, or anything like that. I seem to find it okay relating with people that have got certain issues, disabilities, or anything like that. My wife's a childminder for a start, so I have all kinds of kids coming into the house, and I can turn into a big kid if I want to. But in terms of people with disabilities, I'm quite empathetic anyway. So I can't say I can relate to them even pre my own illness, but I certainly didn't see it as an issue for me. Yeah, I don't quite know how to put it across. I was just able to be quite empathetic and able to teach. It come quite natural.
So how did you why did you choose to work with that niche group? Because many people afraid to do that step and accommodate people with disabilities and afraid to go and dip in like you, myself, John, Abby, going into that deep dive and have a 10, 15 people with disabilities, mental health issues or problems and teach them on a regular basis.
Well, my own club, I've always had an open door policy where if I'm able to teach somebody, then I will teach them. Obviously, I can only have a certain number because, for a safety point of view, if it's just me teaching, I can have a certain number of people with special educational needs or disabilities. But beyond that, it becomes unsafe for me to do that. So although we are opening my own club, I've got to be a little bit careful. But it was Sensei John, it was John Johnson Sensei actually that got me into it as a separate thing. I was sat having dinner one day in my local park, and my phone rang, and it was John. And he's like, "Do you fancy coming and helping me run this session? I've got a club in Chesterfield. It's a disabilities club. Come and see what you think." So I went up one day. I gave him a hand running a class and started picking his brains on how to go about it. And he was quite open and sort of helpful and gave me a few tips. And so then I went away and started building it up at my own end, sort of thing. So it was John that kind of sowed the seed. I've got to give him credit for that.
Yeah, I have lots of help from John as well, and those who don't know John Johnson, you should go check it out. He's a legend in UK in a kind of Shotokan and practical way martial arts and karate. Plus, he does a lot of good work with people with disabilities, and he was helping me as well on the beginning. And we now constantly exchanging the ideas. And like you said, he just rings you and gives you some nugget, and then you go and like, oh, that's cool. I try that. Yeah, he's a really good guy, and we have to
Yeah,
mention as well Elaine, his wife, who is a
yeah. I mean,
very
he's we keep catching each other on little lags, don't we, Les? Uh,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, definitely. If you haven't trained with John Johnson, go train with John. I've trained with John since I was second dan now, I think it was, and I've been with him. I've been training with him ever since. So for quite a few years now. Myself and John take ourselves off to Wakefield. We try and do it once a month. We just go and train with Peter. So John's very open-minded. He trains with many different people. So that's reflected in his karate as well. again, that's why I found myself and John were a good fit. He's had me teaching at his Karate for Mental Health seminar last year and this year, which yourself taught on as well, Les, which was great to teach alongside you. Yeah, so if you've never trained with John before, go train with him. He's a good guy, very knowledgeable, and you won't be disappointed.
So what's the future plans for your club? I know your son is training with you. He's very talented, although everybody seems to be taking Mickey out of him that he's your not favorite son. Uh, but as a martial arts skills, I've been watching him on the seminar, and he does a tremendous job. I think you should be very proud of him, and achieving so much. And what's the plans for you and your club?
So I'm always working on my club, so it's always about trying to do the best that I can, and so Jack, my son, he helps out with. He particularly helped me out when I went off and had the treatment. So Jack and Darren, they both deserve some credit, because there was a period in time where I had to run the club from a distance, and they were the face of it, and they were helping out, and they deserve some good credit for that. So yeah, Jack and Darren. For the future, it's just about bringing people up. I think if people come up with you, everything sort of levels up. And so I'm always working on trying to bring people up, be able to help out with the club. They don't necessarily have to be black belts. So I'm looking at younger grades and bringing them up. But I've got seminars coming up, and I go off teaching. I've been asked to go and teach in India next year. John's asked me to go and teach again at Karate Mental Health, which I will if I'm able to do so, down in Cornwall again. The club is just going to keep growing. That's the aim. That's the plan.
Excellent. So you starting to do a lot of seminars now. I see that you are starting to emerge and kind of spread your ways, which is fantastic. And if you've got a chance to train with Dave, please do so. How do you finding your own voice within the noise of everybody training and teaching seminars?
Well, I just think for myself. So my mindset back when I started training at 9 years old, I was, as I say, training down in Waterloo under Kevin Broughton, and I've been training for a couple of years. And one of my school friends, who he went on to be a British Thai boxing champion, he taught me to go and have a few classes with him, not as him as a teacher, but where he used to train. And so I went training with him. So that was at 11 years old. So I got my karate club, and I used to cross training Thai boxing. So even at 11 years old, back in sort of 1987, that was just normal for me. And so I was doing my karate classes, and I was doing my Thai boxing, and I got into my boxing. And so I've always been a fan of cross training, and I like to work with people, but I'm an individual, and I like to sort of do things that suit me, train in ways that suit me, deliver things that in a fashion that suits me, just basically by myself. I don't try and be anybody else. I don't try and mirror anybody else, because nobody can be that person as well as them. And the same applies to you. Nobody can be yourself as well as you. And I think that's important.
Excellent. Dave, thank you for your time. Always pleasure to talk to you. And I'm looking forward to another Karate for Mental Health and us training together, exchanging, and going to the pub afterwards, because that was great fun too.
Yeah, well, you managed to talk me into coming on this podcast after I've had 3 pints of beer.
No, to be honest,
So yeah.
I really wanted you to be on a podcast, because the way we talk about it in a pub as well, I think it's a valuable message that people need to hear, that if you take the risks of doing something unpleasant, you have more chances to be with us and contribute to the people and the world than giving up. I think that's the message, right?
Yeah, you should never give up. Never give up. While you've got a chance of doing anything, achieving anything, succeeding in anything, never give up. Even if it's just carrying on down a certain road, so long as you're feeling comfortable and reasonably healthy, you should always push on. And that's I think that's what pleasure I get from teaching people with disabilities, because some of them, the small things in life, when you see their face just light up, it's not only rewarding for them, it's rewarding for you as a teacher, and to be able to see that and witness that. Just little things that we take for granted. And so, yeah, if you're able to do something, whatever level you're able to do it at, you should always crack on.
And I think that's going to be title of the podcast, Never Give Up with Dave Shaw.
Well, yeah, I've actually thought about writing a book, as daft as that sounds. I thought about it quite some time ago, but that's another story. But yeah, never give up. That's very,
Okay,
very,
so
very important.
you're going to be
And
another
smile
person.
as well. And
Smile, yeah. You're going to be another person I'm going to be picking on, because I got a couple of people saying to me, oh, I was thinking about writing book. So I'm going to use the not very pleasant language. Just fucking do it. Don't think about it,
yes,
just do it.
I've already got a few paragraphs, but I've not gone beyond that. I think I've got 3 or 4 paragraphs, but yeah, I've not gone beyond that yet.
You know, I'm writing my books 15 minutes a day. Something comes to my mind, I write it down, and that's how you do the book within a year.
Yeah, that's it. Good advice. Yeah, good advice.
All right. Thank you, Dave, and I'm going to see you soon.
Yep. See you, Les. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well done for listening to all of it. You are a superhero. Thank you very much for your support. And if you could leave us that review on a podcast platform, that would be amazing. I appreciate your time, appreciate your support, and I wish you all the best until the next one.
Sports Social Podcast Network.